The Itch Begins. Bob's Quirky Introduction. Hilljack Bob lived in a trailer that looked as though it had spit out half a flea market, and then decided to take a long nap. Rusty lawn ornaments adorned the exterior like out-of-work soldiers standing over a forgotten kingdom. An old flamingo, once a vibrant shade of pink, now resembled a sunburned turkey, dignity slain by time and weather. He had strung lights that twinkled merrily during the summer months, despite it being permanently daytime in his cluttered world, the kind where daylight fought tooth and nail against the perpetual swampy smell wafting from the bayou a stone's throw away. Every inch of Bob's humble abode told a story, or at least a badly told joke. Inside was a cacophony of faded travel brochures, mismatched furniture that looked like a reality show test challenge gone wrong, and an ever-growing collection of musty floral-patterned quilts that Bob insisted were relics of a time when people dressed with more flair. Between a dented can of beans and a bundle of old fishing rods was an ancient globe, revealing just how many lessons Bob had yet to learn about geography. Every time he gazed at it, his itchy feet threatened to take him on another misadventure. "Frida," he bellowed one morning, reaching for a travel brochure that had somehow gotten wedged between a bevy of ceramic cats. Souvenirs from their last family road trip, back when his itch for adventure was more of a mild irritation than a full-blown rash. "What do you think about heading to South Dakota? I bet there's scenery that could just about knock the socks off a gopher." His wife, Frida, peeked around the corner of their kitchen, balancing a spatula in one hand and a half-eaten slice of cornbread in the other. "Bob, the only place you'll knock any socks off is right here in this trailer with your fancy gopher fantasies. Nobody wants to see a grown man tripping over his own 2 feet at Mount Rushmore." Bob nodded enthusiastically, as if she had just supported his life's mission. "Exactly. That's the kind of thrill I'm looking for, Frida. Just think of the stories I could bring back. I could tell them about the time I tried to convince a park ranger to let me wrestle a bear." Frida rolled her eyes, but couldn't suppress the smile creeping into her face. "And wouldn't that make your Aunt Myrtle proud?" The more they bantered back and forth, the more Bob's imagination began to take flight, as if he were preparing his mind for takeoff, while the rest of them lingered in the familiarity of the kitchen. As he looked around the trailer, he couldn't help but appreciate the quirky charm that had built up over the years. Each mismatched chair, every cracked window pane, and those suspiciously cheerful garden gnomes. Each item represented a piece of his restless heart, an itch that refused to go away. Underneath that chaotic exterior lay the spirit of explorers, bungee jumpers, alligator wrestlers, and half-crazed astronauts waiting to break free from societal conformity. Even the fridge was a historical artifact that could rival a museum exhibit, plastered with drawings from local children and sticky notes narrating events that only Bob could find significant. The notes were pinned up with various magnets he had collected from flea markets around town. Each magnet represented a tiny adventure in and of itself. A cheesy crab marked a trip to the coast that ended in disaster, a misplaced margarita, and one very angry seagull. "Hey, Frida, remember that trip to the beach?" Bob gestured, his hands becoming more animated as each memory sparked a new thought. "I swear I saw Bigfoot, or maybe it was just that guy with the Hawaiian shirt and too much hair gel." A chuckle escaped her lips. "You do have a knack for spotting the weirdest things, Bob. You can make a career out of finding that which others overlook." Bob grinned, reveling in the absurdity of it all. Perhaps she was onto something. Being a redneck world traveler hadn't exactly sounded impressive on paper, but it was certainly a way to keep life interesting, especially when life could otherwise be boiled down to finding a new way to cook roadkill. Right then, a glimmer caught his eye. Something sparkling from the corner of the living room wrapped in a basket. It was a series of old photographs, pictures he had long forgotten about, each one a portal to yet another impossibly ridiculous moment that had solidified Bob's very identity. He grabbed the photos, dust dancing around as he flipped through them like a time traveler thumbing through a malfunctioning time machine manual. Each snapshot was a reminder of the mischief he had gotten himself into, a storm of memories filled with crazy companions, outlandish sights, and more than a few misadventures. There he was, standing on a rented mule in Mexico, after losing a game of poker to a bunch of grinning locals. Between laughs, he had forgotten about the wild ride he would take back to his trailer nights later, with a hangover that beat his last wrestling match. Another picture showcased him riding a pig at a county fair, just as exhilarating as you could imagine, with Uncle Brother Joe cheering him from the sidelines, hooting like a champion and cheering for chaos. He couldn't forget the time he tried to reenact an Indiana Jones scene at a roadside tourist trap, only to end up stuck in a fake boulder. The kids around him had loved it, of course, cheering as he flailed like a fish out of water. "Yes, sir," he laughed to himself, reliving those moments of wild abandon. Each photograph was an invitation to remember. "I might have looked foolish, but by golly, I had a blast." Maybe that was what life was all about, collecting these vibrant moments pieced together like a quilt stitched with adventure, laughter, and utter ridiculousness. Just then, a loud clang interrupted his nostalgia. That could only mean one thing. Uncle Brother Joe was on the front porch, making his grand entrance into Bob's slightly chaotic world. Squeezing through the door of the trailer was like a comedy show in itself, but as Uncle Brother Joe shuffled inside, it was as if the uproar level in the room shot up a significant notch. With his wild hair resembling a raccoon that had lost a fight with a lawnmower, he was a spectacular sight for sore eyes. "Bob, I got one word for you," he exclaimed, kicking off his well-worn boots and throwing the dusty backpack on the floor. "Adventure." "Sure hope that adventure involves a nice cup of coffee first," Bob replied with a smirk. "Oh, it does, but only if you bring the honey." "Are you bringing your legendary tales of nerdy escapades again? That's half the reason we all sit together around the campfire," Frida chimed in, laughing. Joe winked. "You betcha. I got stories that'll make a cat laugh on a sour day. Did I ever tell you about the time I got chased off a golf course by a four-legged beast?" "See, this is exactly what I'm talking about," Bob squealed, his excitement bubbling to the surface. "This is my fuel. Your wild adventures and outlandish stories make me want to hit the road." Uncle Brother Joe settled into the old recliner, a makeshift throne in Bob's kingdom of dreams, and began his well-practiced oration. "Back in '81, during one of those balmy summer days, I decided to take a shortcut through a golf course. I mean, who wouldn't? Lots of green grass, fresh air, and the works. But I stumbled into this iguana race. You heard me, a bunch of backyard lizards dressed up like athletes." Bob leaned in closer, eyes wide with enthusiasm. "Go on, please tell me you didn't." "Oh, I did. I thought I could mimic 'em. But let me tell you, one of those green monsters had it in for me. It leapt high into the air, aimed straight for my face, and the next thing I knew, I was wrestling a lizard on the 9th hole." The trailer erupted in laughter, the sounds of joy pouring through mismatched doorways and embedded itself into the fabric of everyday chaos. With Uncle Brother Joe around, every moment turned into another quirky memory, bonding them through shared laughter and prompting Bob's own itch to travel to tighten its grasp. "Frida, we gotta get on the road," Bob shouted suddenly, adrenaline racing through his veins. "Let's pack up. Maybe we go check that place out in Wyoming I've been eyeing." "Bob, you've been eyeing that place since the day we met." She rolled her eyes, but couldn't help but let out a chuckle. "Exactly. Something's gotta give here. This dream won't activate itself." Thus began another round of friendly bickering, matching the upbeat rhythm of chaos that had come to define their lives. The walls of that trailer housed an entire universe of ideas, dreams, and curiosity that never really settled. Bob's itch for adventure surged through him more than ever as he thought of all the things he could gather for a new trip. Curios and oddities, mismatched socks and posters, brilliant roadside attractions he wanted to explore. Living in that trailer was its own kind of adventure, with anticipation creeping in like a raccoon rummaging through the local trash. Each night ushered in tales of the absurd waiting to be told. So, as Bob dove deeper into his memories and shared elaborately humorous anecdotes in tandem with Uncle Brother Joe, the itch spread. It mixed treasures of laughter with a strong desire to escape the confines of his cluttered sanctuary. Maybe tomorrow, he thought, shaking the weight of photos in his hand while Frida laid out snacks on the table. Perhaps tomorrow they would say goodbye to lawn ornaments and faded brochures in search of the ultimate escapade that paper dreams could never quite replicate. And who knew what kind of mischief awaited him out there? He could already be picturing himself standing at some ridiculous landmark, maybe clad in a gopher suit and crowned the king of all things awkward. And as he shared a laugh with Uncle Brother Joe and Frida, one truth became brilliantly crystal clear. It was always the crazy, quirky moments that made life worth living. And whether or not he had to deal with a few dire consequences along the way, this redneck traveler was ready to dive headfirst into a universe of unpredictable hilarity. Uncle Brother Joe's Tall Tales. The sun had barely set when Bob plopped down on the weathered porch of his trailer, the wood creaking under the weight of memories that buzzed around him like fireflies. A warm southern breeze played lazily with his straw hat, and the sound of distant frogs croaking filled the air. Leaning back, he closed his eyes and let the night stir the tales that had been spinning in his mind, tales woven with an affection that only a nephew could have for an uncle. "Uncle Brother Joe," Bob muttered, grinning as he recalled the man who was a walking storybook, rich with laughter and filled with mischief. Joe was a connoisseur of exaggeration, a master of the art of storytelling. Each tale he spun was more ridiculous than the last, often leaving Bob's jaw hanging at the sheer absurdity. It was the kind of absurdity that seeped into every nook and cranny of their family lore, making it all the more sacred. Bob remembered the moonlit nights when Uncle Brother Joe would settle into his rickety old rocking chair, the stars twinkling like a million mischievous eyes peering down at them. Those evenings were transformed into their realm of imagination. Bob would lean in, eyes wide like a child at Christmas, ready to be whisked away to a land of alligators and sequin bow ties and moonshine flowing like rivers. One particular tale danced vividly in Bob's memory. Joe had spun it like a seasoned bard, outlining the fateful day he had gone fishing at Swamp Town, a place where the alligators were as plentiful as the mosquitoes. "Now let me tell you, Bob," Joe started, his voice dripping with excitement. "There I was, knee-deep in mud, when I caught sight of the biggest gator this side of the Mississippi." Bob could almost feel the sticky warmth of the mud as he imagined Uncle Joe, fishing pole in one hand and a jar of pickled eggs in the other. Joe was notorious for living life on the edge of ridiculousness, and this fishing trip would be no different. With wild gestures, he continued, "I tell you, this gator had teeth like shiny picket fences, and it was eyeing my fried chicken like it was a side dish." Laughter bubbled up between them as Bob imagined Joe, his unkempt hair flapping in the wind, bargaining with a gator over his lunch. Bob leaned forward in anticipation, tickled by the imagery. "And I thought, hey, that's my lunch. So what do? I throw the fried chicken as far as I can, right into the water." The thought of the soggy chicken belly flopping into the waiting jaws of a gator sent Bob into a fit of giggles. "Now," Joe chuckled, "I didn't realize the gators have a mighty fine taste for southern fried. The moment I tossed that chicken, I was knee-deep in the laziest water." Uncle Joe would throw his arms in the air, pantomiming the imminent disaster. "That gator snapped it up quicker than a squirrel on a corncob." His eyes twinkled with mischief, reveling in the hilarity of his past. "Next thing I knew, Bob," Joe said, his voice lowering to a grave whisper as he leaned in closer, "that gator plopped up on the bank, looked right at me, and I thought, great day in the morning." Bob could see the dramatic wave of Uncle Joe's hand, as if he were a director commanding the attention of a captivated audience. "And what do I do next?" Joe continued, savoring the moment. "I whip out my trusty fishing pole and start doing a little dance like I was in some sort of swamp hoedown." The image of Uncle Joe doing a jig, a fishing pole raised high, and a gator bobbing his head along like a good old country music fan made Bob laugh harder than he had ever laughed before. "Let me tell you, that gator took off like a bullet, leaving me down in that muddy swamp wondering what the heck just happened. Each word was a bead strung onto the necklace of Bob's memory, entwining laughter and adventure, absurdity and charm. As Bob reminisced, his mind traversed to another tale, equally outrageous. One Sunday afternoon, about as serene as a chorus of crickets singing, Uncle Joe had decided to rope a bull that had wandered too close to his backyard barbecues. "Now, I've rumbled with many beasts in my time," Joe said as he recounted the incident. "From that gator at Swamp Town to a raccoon that fancied himself a prince." Bob could still hear that boisterous cackle of his uncle, each laugh punctuated with a thwack of the rocking chair hitting against the porch floor. "But that bull, now that was a whole different kettle of fish." Joe had equipped himself in full cowboy regalia, boots included, as if he were heading for a showdown at high noon instead of just a backyard spectacle. "I stepped out there, square as a stick, and I said, 'Hey there, Bessie, let's dance.'" Bob could picture Uncle Joe, his chest puffed out, approaching the bewildered animal with swagger akin to that of a gunslinger. With a nervous gulp, Bob would lean in closer, grinning from ear to ear, because this was where the tale took a turn. "So, I lassoed that bull, but let me tell you, it didn't have the slightest idea that it was caught. I thought I was the rodeo champion of the world." The way Joe painted the picture made Bob feel as if he were right there, witnessing the chaos unfold. "But that bull," Joe continued, shaking his head incredulously, "it took off faster than a jet on a runway. I found myself tied to the back of my own kiddie pool that I had rigged up for those hot summer days." The thought of Uncle Joe being dragged around, limbs flailing like a clothespin strapped on a runaway thresher, made comprehension slip through Bob's laughter. "Now, instead of reeling that bull in like a seasoned pro, I followed it around the neighborhood, pulling children from their porches. And can you believe it? They were cheering like I was the grand marshal of a parade." Joe's eyes would gleam with pride, unabashed by the undeniable absurdity of the tale. In his heart, Bob held a warm affection for Uncle Brother Joe's stories. They were emblematic of the complexity of adventure. Life, love, and laughter stitched together with threads of adventures that often turned sideways into delightful chaos. "You know, Bob," Joe had said on more than one moonlit night, "you've got the spirit of a traveler, just like me. The world's a big old place, and folks, they need to hear your stories." Joe's encouragement wrapped around Bob like a favorite childhood blanket. A comforting warmth heralded the dreams of a wanderlusting heart. Underneath the wildness of his zany tales, there lingered an essence of wisdom. Life was full of unexpected adventures, and laughter made the journey worthwhile. As a clenched fist of dreams tightened in Bob's chest, each chuckle contrasted against the backdrop of sometimes grim realities of everyday, mundane life. "Uncle Brother," Bob mused, "you paint the world with words. You saw gators dancing, bulls riding waves of joy, and cousins celebrating life." These were the things that ignited something inside him, a longing to embrace the absurdity of life by forging paths he had yet to explore. Perhaps it was the way Uncle Joe wore adventure like a second skin, or maybe it was the way each outlandish tale resonated like a familiar ripple in the water. Either way, the urge to cast off to foreign lands, to wake in a bed of whispers and tales beyond his trailer walls, was insatiable. One summer evening, under the glowing silver moon, Bob found himself perched on that old porch looking at the horizon. "I need to do more than just dream, don't I?" he asked the night sky, his heart racing. He pictured himself on a long road trip, a view filled with oversized signs and waving palm trees swaying precariously in the wind, embarking on an adventure reminiscent of Uncle Joe's wildest tales. The itch began. The desire for roads untraveled and stories untold, enough to set Bob's soul on fire. As the weight of nostalgia wrapped around his shoulders, Bob chuckled. "If I'm going to travel, I better have some stories to tell." With a surge of inspiration fueled by Uncle Brother Joe's outlandish adventures, the desire to write his own story ignited something wild within him. In that moment, the stars above seemed to nod in agreement, winking in delight at the possibilities that lay ahead. Bob braced himself for the journey he would take, for every tumble and turn. And perhaps every gator wrangled back to safety would inspire a chuckle, bridging the gap between his humdrum life and that of Uncle Brother Joe's fantastical creations. As the moon climbed higher and the night deepened, Bob leaned back in his rocking chair, eyes fixed on the horizon. The stories were there, waiting to unfurl. They sparkled beneath the stars, shadows dancing in the night like whispers of forgotten adventures. Bob felt in his bones that the path to his own glorious tales was calling. With the warmth of the afternoon memories hugging his heart, Bob tipped his hat to the stars, knowing full well that Uncle Brother Joe would steer him clear of the gators. Metaphorically speaking, of course. Bob took a deep breath, ready to step off the porch and embark on the wild adventure waiting just beyond the horizon. The spark of adventure. Bob sat in his cluttered trailer, surrounded by a chaotic assortment of mismatched furniture that had seen better days. The faded floral couch sagged under the weight of old blankets, while a tattered armchair seemed to lean precariously against the wall, as if it was struggling to hold itself up. Sunlight poured through the grimy windows, illuminating the dust motes that danced like tiny fireflies in the stale air. But it wasn't the sunbeams or the slightly questionable scent of last night's leftover casserole that drew Bob's attention today. Today, he was on a mission. With the determination normally reserved for alligator wrestling or his latest harebrained scheme, he dug into a box labeled Memories, or What I Can Remember Anyway. A rather ambitious title for the jumble of assorted memorabilia inside. A lifetime of laughter and tears lay amongst ticket stubs, broken trinkets, and a substantial quantity of his wife Frida's mildly embarrassing poetry. As he sifted through the box, he unearthed a stack of old photographs, yellowing at the corners. The first picture he held up featured a much younger Bob, sporting an oversized straw hat that looked like it could double as a satellite dish. His hand was casually tossed over a fence post at the local fair, beside a sign advertising the 4-H pig contest. He could almost hear the distant sounds of children laughing and the faint twang of country music in the background. "Look at that," Bob chuckled to himself, shaking his head as he admired the goofy grin plastered across his younger self's face. "I was so excited about a pig contest. Little did I know, my destiny was to wrestle gators and become a redneck astronaut." Nostalgia washed over him like a warm embrace. The image rekindled a sense of joy that tickled his core, drawing forth a flood of memories. As Bob flipped through more pictures, each snapshot whispered tales of long-forgotten adventures. Each turn of the page transported him back to a moment in time. There was a picture of a fishing trip with Uncle Brother Joe. They both wore matching Hawaiian shirts, though Bob's was 2 sizes too large, making him look like a bright pink floating balloon. Their crammed fisherman's boat bobbed dangerously on the water as an equally oversized fish leaped up to greet them, mouth agape. Her name had been Bessie, the largest catfish in those waters. Really, she could have taken a chunk out of Bob's leg if not for his quick reflexes, but they'd simply held on to each other and laughed till it hurt. Frida was mad I brought Bessie home instead of a buffet of fish fillets, but I ain't never seen her complain once when I fried that big old catfish the next Saturday night. Bob mused, a grin spreading across his face. He could almost hear Frida's sharp retort, followed by laughter of their friends gathered round the kitchen table, a luminescent tapestry of strong personalities intertwined in beautiful chaos. As he turned the pages, he stumbled upon an unforgettable photograph from the infamous family reunion where he had accidentally donned Frida's cousin Betty's dress at the potluck. In the picture, he held a plate piled high with food, blissfully unaware of the mix-up until the camera flash revealed his predicament. The ensuing laughter from his relatives had been so infectious, it felt like a tickle fight that spilled out of the living room and into the yard. Bob's sturdy frame was dwarfed by the frilly pink fabric, and even in the throes of unexpected embarrassment, he couldn't help but laugh along, instantly feeling part of something larger than himself. As these memories painted an emotional landscape where each laugh resonated, playing a symphony of joy, mischief, and warmth. But amongst the warmth, too, was a restless itch bobbing beneath the surface, something that had been waiting to break free. As Bob's fingers brushed against the worn paper, he felt a deep yearning rise within him. He flicked through more images, a series of snapshots taken on their honeymoon. They had camped under the vast cover of the starlit sky, tossing marshmallows at each other and having deep conversations while the campfire crackled beside them. He remembered the moment they first gazed at the Milky Way, sprawled on a blanket and dreaming about all the places they would escape to someday. Man, that was the night I told her I wanted to go to space, and she didn't even roll her eyes. Can you believe that? Bob laughed to himself. He slapped the photo with the palm of his hand, remembering those initial dreams, the hope and excitement of exploring the great unknown. The urge to fuel those dreams rekindled a spark inside him, hinting at what lay dormant, waiting to erupt. Bob leaned back, regarding the walls of his beloved trailer, where mismatched decor bore witness to his day-to-day antics. Here, everything was oddly in harmony. His collection of mismatched lawn ornaments and walls decorated with half-finished boards of ambitious plans, and like clockwork, the familiar itch flared again. Lord knows I love my trailer and fried chicken nights, Bob muttered, speaking to the ceiling as if it might reply. But maybe it's time to let go of this comfort zone and get back into the wild where the stories wait to be lived. The swamp ain't the only place that brings life. There's a whole other world out there. His heart thumping, Bob unraveled the next set of photographs. One picture revealed him poised with a 6-foot-tall grasshopper in a bizarre contest, most likely to hop a mile, showcasing his developable knack for finding the zaniest of adventures. He chuckled at the expression on his face. It was the look of pure, utter determination, a wild spirit yearning to emerge. That's right, Grasshopper. You inspire me. Bob bellowed to the still air, gleefully swiping his fingers over the grainy surface of the image. Reasons and thoughts collided in his mind. His heart raced as fragments of memories reassembled into an insatiable desire to escape the ordinary, a yearning to once again embrace the thrill of the unexpected. Alligator wrestling was only the beginning. He longed for everything colorful, everything that made the heart soar, bursting out from a sleepy swamp like a firework on the 4th of July. From wrestling alligators to hopping across continents, the itch had taken hold, and now it was the time to let it grow. Bob eyed the photos scattered across his coffee table, their stories punctuating the air with unspoken excitement, as if beckoning him to join the fun once more. What's it going to be, Bob? Let's get out from under this roof and throw on our adventure shoes. I want to be the redneck for all seasons, he shouted, caught up in the fervor. Bob's thoughts snapped back to reality, and his eyes landed back on the very last photo. It depicted him with a tinfoil hat, taking a ride in a makeshift rocket prior to his infamous redneck astronaut phase. The picture exuded sheer absurdity, yet it touched the essence of who he was. This is it, he murmured in awe, the idea blossoming fully now. I'm going to take off, pack up the equipment, and hit the road. Gonna be traveling, tinfoil-hatted phenomenon inspiring all kinds of wild adventures. A journey that could make Frida's cousin Betty cry with laughter. We're gonna travel so far. With each word, the exhilaration built within him. Bob leapt to his feet, causing a small avalanche of trinkets to tumble off the table, jingling and clattering to the floor. As he slid back the curtain and glanced outside, the sprawling meadow before him glowed the golden afternoon light, as if a grand adventure was waiting just beyond the horizon. The itch for adventure is about to hit the open road, Bob shouted triumphantly. His heart raced as he began breathing in rhythm with an irrational vigor. Thoughts whirled in his head as he oscillated between images of picturesque landscapes and wild encounters. Though his excitement, punctuated by the call of adventure, pulled him toward the great beyond, he paused to reflect on his beloved Frida, who always seemed his anchor. Gazing at the photographs, reveling in nostalgia, Bob could almost hear her laughter, feel the warmth of her spirit wrapped snugly around him. It would be their adventure together, threading through the stitches of their past while forging ahead into new territory. The spark of adventure flickered, ignited, carving a path deep into his heart. All right, girl, let's get this party started. he declared to nobody in particular, while racing to the kitchen to grab a notebook where he jotted down wild ideas that had yet to take form. In a fury of inspiration, he scribbled down his plans on the page. 1. Destination Swamplandia. Making friends with countless alligators and perhaps befriending a local swamp sage who can share wisdom. 2. Bake sale for a rocket. Because who doesn't want to fund a rocket with homemade peach cobbler? 3. Pining for puns. Hitting up every town fair for contests that celebrate odd talents and food challenges. 4. Far-flung local food options. There's nothing more exquisite than a questionable food truck serving nachos in uncharted territories. 5. Teaching kids how to bounce like grasshoppers. Because every kid should know how to ditch their worries. He envisioned themselves surrounded by whispering pine trees as they basked in the sunlight in the concoction of wild flavors. The thought was exhilarating, palpable as he pictured every crazy turn of the journey. This, he resolved, would not be just a road trip. It would be the trek of a lifetime, a journey deep diving into the mold of creativity and outlandish dreams, where every twist and turn was bound to reveal a story worth telling. The gauntlet was laid before him, bearing the imprint of blue skies, sun-kissed fields, bustling markets at every stop, and a promise lurking behind every corner. The itch he once had masked under comfort was now unfurling wild wings, embodying the essence of restless adventure stretching high into the sky. Bob closed the box of photographs with a big smile, mind bubbling with the myriad items he would need for his grand redeployment into the world. The pictures of his past melded beautifully with his dreams, sculpting a picturesque running start, reminding him that while these memories were cozy, the call of the adventure was louder. He was ready to embrace whatever crazy escapade awaited him, as long as Frida was by his side. Time to ignite that itch, Bob. We're busting out of here. Adventure, here I come, Bob exclaimed, bounding with energy as he prepared to tackle the fascinating unknowns awaiting him just beyond the walls of familiarity. The spirit of adventure was alive and well, swinging open the door to a new chapter that would surely include every epic, atomic, and downright absurd. With an eager twinkle in his eye and a heart swelling with hope, Bob launched into a whirlpool of planning. The world awaited him, and like any true redneck, with an unquenchable thirst for travel, he was ready to light the fuse toward a life layered in laughter, friendship, and unparalleled adventure.